Hi, my name is Jordan Rivet, and I am the author of Seabound, a post-apocalyptic adventure series set at sea. Today, I'm just going to read the first chapter of Seabound for you, so I hope you enjoy it. Here we go. This is Seabound by Jordan Rivet. Chapter 1. The Riding Storm. A horn blasted in the depths of the ship. Esther sat up as the sound thundered through her cabin and lightning illuminated the porthole. She swung her legs over the edge of the bunk, feeling the cold spread through the worn toes of her socks. Then the ship lurched, tipping her to her feet. Esther felt a twinge of irritation. Did it have to be tonight? She waited, ready to move at a moment's notice, and scrubbed a hand through her straight black hair. She'd cut it bluntly, hacking it short to keep it out of the way of her work, but it had grown down almost to her shoulders again, shaggy and uneven. She'd have to do something about that. A second horn shivered through the dark. A storm was coming. She listened for a third call. The wind picked up, driving water against the porthole, but there were no more horns. Just two. It's a rider. Still, that lurch had her worried. Esther jammed her feet into her boots, grabbed a tattered raincoat, and pushed open the flimsy metal door. She wasn't on storm duty, but there was work to do. The floor rolled. The waves would be coming hard and fast now. The Catalina wasn't a small ship, but Esther could already feel the wild motion of the sea. She trailed her hand along the bulkhead as she jogged down the passageway. Esther's boots scraped bare carpet that had once been plush, back when the Catalina had been a proper cruise ship. She could hardly remember the feeling of soft fibers between her toes. But now her mind was on more practical concerns. She left her home corridor and made her way to the darkened plaza. A crystal chandelier still swayed from the ceiling, but the bulbs had been repurposed for more essential needs. The hall was a garish reminder of the way the world used to be. Esther was accustomed to moving through the ship without light. The world had been dark for 16 years. It wasn't pitch black, of course. The sun rose and set the same as it had during her early childhood on land. But the curtain of ash that had filled the atmosphere and changed their lives forever kept the world in perpetual shades of gray. It was a gloomy, overcast darkness, the kind that led some people to despair and others to fight for new ways to survive. Esther stomped down the grand staircase, joining her neighbors who'd left their cabins to make sure the Catalina rode out the storm. Now that she was up, she felt the familiar thrill that always accompanied violent weather. Finally, something was happening to break up the monotony of life at sea, and she was ready. "Hi, Esther, dear. Thought you were on duty last week." Her friend Bernadette was carrying a canister of batteries down the stairs. Bernadette was one of the few adults on the Catalina who was shorter than Esther. She had long white hair, and her chunky turquoise sweater, a gift shop remnant, nearly swallowed her tiny hands. It bore a faded screen print of the Catalina and the slogan, "Your island at sea." "I was," Esther said, "just checking on Callie. It's her first time watching the pumps during a rider," Esther said, walking beside Bernadette for a few paces. "She'll be okay," Bernadette said. "She's been following you around since she could walk. She knows what to do." Esther shrugged. "We'll see. Do you need help with those?" "Oh, I'll be fine. These bones still have a little strength left." Bernadette smiled, and Esther noticed she had lost another tooth. Someone on board would need to replace the old dentist soon. At the bottom of the grand staircase, Esther swung through a service doorway and made her way into the depths of the ship. Maybe Callie could try dentistry. She was keen to assist Esther with engine maintenance, but she was too bubbly and flighty for the careful, dirty work of a mechanic. And she didn't love it like Esther did. The ship gave a particularly violent shudder. The wind must be picking up, but Esther could no longer hear it as she climbed down a spiral staircase and into the bowels of the Catalina. Still, she wasn't too concerned. It was a rider, not a runner, after all. They would have been warned by radio if the storm was going to be bad enough to use their precious fuel reserves to escape. The Catalina would roll through this one as it had through every rider since Esther and the others had made their homes aboard the ship. Their weather prediction technology was improving, and they hadn't gotten close enough to a real runner to need their fuel reserves in years. Esther pushed open the hatch to the engine room and stomped along the metal catwalk. her footsteps clanging in the yawning space. The cavernous room took up the 2 lowest levels of the ship, beneath the waterline, and when the engines were off, it was surprisingly quiet. The machines cast hulking shadows across her path. She passed the first block of silent marine diesel cylinders and climbed down to the bottom level. Her boots splashed on the final step. "What the hell is going on?" Esther said. A layer of water covered the floor of the engine room. 16-year-old Callie stood ankle-deep in the water, apparently having a minor panic attack. "Esther!" she shrieked. "I'm so glad you're here! We're sinking!" Callie's red hair, which she'd tried to cut to look like Esther's, frizzed out in all directions. She was operating a pump manually, of all things. The radio by the door sputtered, its message indistinct. The lights flickered violently. "Stop doing that, Callie. Do you really think it's going to help?" Esther said calmly. Callie kept a tight grip on the pump as if it were a life raft. "I don't know what to do. The pump stopped. I think there's a short." "It's all right," Esther said. "Come over here and hold the light for me." She splashed through the water covering the floor to the open control box on the far wall. A spark of electricity crackled from a loose wire. "Was this open when the water started coming in?" Esther asked. She yanked rubber gloves from her back pocket and bent the wires away from the water. You could never be too careful. "I think maybe I left it open last time I checked on the circuits," Callie said. She stood by Esther's shoulder, rubbing a blister that had formed on her finger. Operating the pump by hand, indeed. Esther took a small flashlight from her belt and handed it to her young assistant. "You need to make sure this thing is shut and sealed." "I've left it open before and nothing's happened," Callie wailed. "Just be more careful next time. Hand me the smaller toolkit." Esther planted her feet far apart and went to work on the circuits, quickly slicing and realigning wires, preparing to bypass the damaged area. "Tell me about the water," she said. "Oh, right." Callie looked down at the flood soaking into her jeans. "Heard on the radio that we hit some debris. I think it was part of an old shipping container or something. Put a gash in the hull." "Who's on the repairs?" "I don't know. I was just supposed to control the water intake and it's a disaster. Are we going to sink?" "No, I'll fix it," Esther said, privately relieved she had decided to come down here even though she wasn't on duty. Callie wasn't ready for this. "Shipping container, huh? Hope they pulled it up. I'm desperate for some decent steel." Structural repairs weren't part of Esther's domain, but the men from the repair crew sometimes gave her leftover scraps, which she used to work on improvements to the ship's systems. They knew she wouldn't waste the metal, even if they didn't always think her ideas would work. But Esther believed she could do more than fix the machines. One day, she would prove it. She flipped the circuit on the control box. Nothing happened. The ship rocked, dousing them with salty water. Esther shielded the control box with her body to keep it dry. She flipped the switch again. On the third try, half of the pump sputtered to life. Something was blocking the rest. Esther moved along the line to the first silent pump, the water sloshing around her. It had risen almost to her kneecaps. Her foot bumped a loose bolt on the floor. She plunged a hand into the cold water and grabbed it as it slid past her again. "What's this?" Everything in the Catalina had to be tied down, contained, controlled. Callie shone the beam of the flashlight onto the bolt. "Oh, I forgot about that I found that the other day and forgot to tell you about it," she said, biting the edge of her lip. "I set it over there somewhere." She waved her hand vaguely in the direction of the big steel toolbox. "Rust and salt," Esther swore. "I could have fixed this days ago." "I'm sorry. I didn't know it was a big deal." Esther shook her head and then took a deep breath and dropped into the water beneath one of the pumps. She felt her way through the dark. In the silence, the water pressing into her ears, she could focus on the connections, sensing what was out of place. Sure enough, one of the tubes had come loose, disrupting the pressure of half the system and triggering the safety cutoff. The rocking of the ship pushed her back and forth in the cold water. She gripped the pipes and felt her way along the grooves and joints of the machinery. She came up to grab a breath and a wrench and then slid back beneath the pipe. Holding the loose bolt in her teeth, she forced the tube back into its socket and tightened it into place. She wished Callie had chosen another occupation. Engineering was not for the absent-minded. You needed to be detail-oriented, careful, and technical. They couldn't afford mistakes. Esther surfaced. "Flip the third switch from the right on the control box, Callie. Third from the right." She pulled herself up from beneath the pumps, spit the salt from her mouth, and stepped back. The machinery shuddered. Slowly, the impellers began to turn. Along the line, the remaining pumps sputtered into motion, drawing water from the belly of the Catalina and spewing it back into the sea. Esther liked the sound of machines operating the way they were supposed to, shifting and coughing with a satisfying rhythm. "Excellent," Esther said. "Now keep an eye on the water level and clean up this mess. But you'll be fine. I'm going to see about that steel." She left Callie standing beside the control box, mouth opening and closing in protest like a red-haired otter's. Esther had materials to collect. All right, and that's the end of Chapter 1 of Seabound, which is a post-apocalyptic adventure series set on kind of a souped-up cruise ship. So if you are interested in reading the rest of Seabound, you can get it as an ebook on Amazon. It's $2.99, or if you're a member of Kindle Unlimited, you can read it for free for now. The second book in the series, Sea Swept, is coming soon, probably later this spring. And then, of course, you can also get this snazzy paperback either from Amazon or from BarnesandNoble.com, and it's going for about $13. So I hope you liked the first chapter, and let me know in the comments if you had a chance to read Seabound, and tell me what you thought. Thanks a lot, guys. And once again, my name is Jordan Rivet, and I'm the author of Seabound.